The world's largest technology company, Apple, is due to publish its latest quarterly figures today. It comes just a day after its boss, Steve Jobs, announced that he would be stepping down from the post because of ill health. It's the second time he's taken sick leave from the company, sparking a fall in Apple's share price. Well, Simon Middleton is a brand strategist. He joins me now from our Norwich studio. Simon, good of you to join us. In terms of Apple generally, what we're seeing here, it would appear, is so much faith in the boss that the company is suffering when he announces he's off.
Yes, that's true, and Steve Jobs is incredibly important to Apple, but it's only a fool would write Apple off. I think the great legacy that Steve Jobs has created for himself, if he decides to take early retirement, for example, I've no idea whether that might happen, but if he did, he's created one of the greatest brands in the world. And actually, most customers, most ordinary customers who've come to Apple in the last 5 years don't come because they know the name of Steve Jobs. They come because of the great brand and the great products.
But isn't it a mistake not to have someone in the wings, someone who can just carry it on in a seamless way?
Well, I wouldn't be quick to assume that they don't have people in the wings. The question is not whether they've got sound management in place, because I'm certain that they have. The question is whether or not they decide to make that sound management personality-led. Steve Jobs is an individual personality, like Richard Branson, like Bill Gates and so on. But not all great brands need that customer-facing personality, if you like. And in fact, it's sometimes a mark of maturity of a brand when they go from the individual-led to the more corporate. And maybe it's time for Apple to start doing that. There is a danger in it, of course, but it's part of the growing of a company.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because they've got products that are now synonymous, really, with certainly the current generation, the iPad, the iPhone, everything. And yet, for one man to have such an influence, I mean, are you surprised at that level? No,
not at all. It's a high-tech company. It was born of the great sort of innovation period of the 70s and 80s, and then, of course, when he came back in the early 90s, it's part of that generation. It's the same generation as Branson and Gates. So I'm not surprised he's incredibly important, but I think we will see over the next 5 to 10 years a lot of those individually led companies growing up and probably getting a little more corporate. But Apple is still a great brand, and as I said at the beginning, I think that's the legacy. Even if Steve Jobs decided to retire tomorrow, what he's created is a world-class brand.
So whilst there may be jitters in the stock market short term, in terms of sales, it won't affect them?
I don't think it'll affect it one iota. I think it's a jitter in the stock market, exactly. And as long as they demonstrate that when the captain takes a holiday, that the rest of the crew can steer the ship, which I'm sure they can, then I think, as far as the customer's concerned, it's still a great brand that produces fantastic, innovative products. So I don't think the long-term brand is threatened at all.
Simon, you mentioned Richard Branson, Bill Gates. What is it about these people that makes them so important and so influential, not just in their particular company, but in the whole business?
Well, I think it's a combination of whatever their speciality is. In Steve Jobs' case, it's technology, and in Richard Branson's case, it's kind of doing a deal for the customer, I suppose, is one way to sum it up. But it's a combination of a certain set of skills plus a certain kind of personality. And in Branson, we see this sort of piratical, slightly laddish character. In Steve Jobs has got a sort of slightly hip professor kind of character. They all have different personality types, but there's something about them that makes the first wave of customers take an interest in them and sort of take them to their heart. So I'm part of the generation that really thinks Steve Jobs is important. But my children, for example, in their 20s buying Apple products, are much less involved in the personality of Steve Jobs and much more involved in the greater brand. So those key figures are really, really important, but they're not the be-all and end-all. Virgin, as a company, will go on long after Richard Branson decides to retire to an island in the Caribbean, for example.
Simon, thank you very much for your time this morning. Simon Middleton.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
Just after 9:45, our head